Hi there. Welcome to another edition of The Fine Line Between Stupid and Clever. And in this guitar video, I'm going to show how I made this combination epoxy wood guitar out of an old Telecaster kit off of Amazon. So in a previous video, I had made this epoxy guitar, cast it out of a mold, and while I really enjoy the guitar and it's really cool, it's heavy as all get out. So casting a mold of epoxy by itself, this is about 10.5 pounds. I wanted to try another way to play with epoxy and do more like artistic-y kind of things by lowering the weight and adding wood as a background. And this one, after all of its glory, comes out at about 8.5 pounds, about the same weight as Les Paul. So this is a gift that I built for my brother-in-law, whom we'll be spending Christmas with at his beach house. So I wanted something to be kind of artsy that you can hang on the wall and also be pretty functional because he's a guitar player as well. So this is about 3/4 inch routed out with multiple layers of epoxy, one with mica powder in it to make it look like an ocean. And then I did use some actual sand and seashells on the other side. And in the middle of it, I embedded some LED lights too. Ooh, isn't that nice? So stick around, I'll walk you through the whole video on how I built this every step of the way, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. Okay, so here's the whiteboard plan for what I'm gonna try to do with the Beach House guitar. I'm gonna start with a $100 Amazon kit for a Telecaster. These are pretty good kits and they kind of come with everything you need to build a guitar, but I'm gonna take that guitar body and I'm gonna route out the whole body with a 1/2 inch set off at about 3/4 inch deep to make an epoxy insert. So I'm going to insert and pour epoxy inside the body. Now, inside the body, I'm going to separate the body into two pieces. One's going to be sand and one's going to be like ocean with the beach. I'm going to experiment with some ocean epoxy mica powder to make like a wave effect. I might even try to put in some glow in the dark epoxy powder to see if I can make part of the ocean glow in the dark. Who knows? I'm going to age the body of the guitar on the back and on the sides with a solution of vinegar and steel wool. I've used that multiple times and it's worked out really well, but it's to give it that aged look like it washed up on a beach somewhere. I'm also going to do some basic relicking with the hardware, but all of this is going to be for a project for a gift for my brother-in-law, whom I will be visiting this Christmas, who just bought a beach house. So this could be hopefully something he'll hang on the wall there and make for a good conversation piece. Wish me luck.
Okay, so I built my router template, which has got a 1/2 inch set off, set back from the edge of the guitar body, and I've traced my outline over the guitar body. Now it's time to throw the Forstner bit in the drill press and hog it out. And I got the body all hogged out right at 3/4 inch depth. That's about the depth of the neck pickup pocket. Now I kind of cut off as many of the sharp corners as I could with the edge of the Forstner bit. But now I'm going to take my double-sided tape, slap it on top of this, and then use my finish router to clean up the edges. So now I'd like to make a recess for the EL wire that goes underneath the edge of the body so that the EL wire is not visible directly and just shines laterally through the epoxy. So the way I'm going to do that is I've taken the bearing off of this flush bearing, and that gives me just that tiny little groove that I can run around the top and create that recess for the EL wire. So I've drawn with a pencil mark, what I think I'm just going to make as my little shoreline between the beach and the ocean here. And I'm going to take my Forstner bit and I'm going to go along this line and drill this section down, lower it just by about 1/8 of an inch or so that when I pour epoxy, it'll keep that nice border there for me. Might as well. And while I've got everything hooked up, I'll just make it a little bit deeper and add a little more epoxy. So before I start thinking about epoxy, I realized that I have the jack hole here in the side to figure out what to do with. I've decided I'm doing a single pickup setup here, and I only want a volume and a tone control. So I think I'm going to put the jack actually in the control cavity. That eliminates the need to route out the bottom of the epoxy that would disrupt a lot of the cosmetics. So I went and found myself a 3/4 inch broom handle, and I made myself a plug, cut the end off of that, glue that sucker right in there, and we'll seal that off. So I put in my broom handle plug and got it sanded down and evened out. I actually took the router and cleaned up the insides around there as well. Now, as I'm getting ready to thinking about epoxy, I want to pre-treat the inside edges of the routing cavity here with the vinegar and steel wool stain to give it that pre-conditioned look that will go on the rest of the body. Because once I start laying epoxy, then I don't want to have fresh wood showing through underneath the sides of the epoxy. I won't be able to get to it later, so we'll do it now. So it's been about 15 minutes after applying the vinegar and steel wool stain to the inside of the guitar, and you can see, and I just, for comparison, I threw it on this side of the bottom of the cavity just to see how it grays up nicely and gives it that aged look compared to the fresh wood over here. So in order to try to avoid wasting epoxy, I am going to estimate the amount of epoxy it's going to take to fill the guitar body by first filling it with sand and then measuring the sand that it took to fill. So I got a big bucket and some play sand, which is also going to be the sand I'm going to make the beach out of, and we will measure out how much sand that is, and that's how I'll mix my epoxy. So all that sand in the body did come out to less than 64 ounces there, or 1 3/4 liters. That gives me a good estimation. So with pouring a little extra, I should have plenty left over. So before I do anything else, I'm going to mix up a little bit of West Systems epoxy and coat and seal the inside cavity of the entire body here. I understand that that will reduce the chances that this will let off a bunch of air bubbles when I do the deep pour later. So I got some corrugated plastic and made some inserts for the routing cavities for the pickup and for the control cavity. Hopefully this will protect me, and I've got them caulked down in the bottom, hopefully sealed up nicely. That'll save me a little of extra pouring epoxy and also the hassle of having to figure out where to put the control cavity. And now it's time to start playing around with some sand. I'm going to start throwing some seashells on the sandy part. I'm going to put a layer down of epoxy that'll stick sand to it. I'm just going to pour the sand over it and then dump it out, kind of like you did with glitter when you were a kid in elementary school. So with the first application of sand, I can tell that not too much of it really stuck just with a coat of epoxy down. And I think it's going to take multiple applications of glue and sand to get things looking pretty good before I go for it. I don't want to just try a deep pour of the clear epoxy on top of the sand. I think that would turn out to be a pretty big mess. I think I want things to be pretty darn static by the time I go for the deep pour. And besides, I got to do the whole ocean side too.
Okay, so I've watched about 840 videos on how to do ocean waves with epoxy, and I just don't want to watch any more of them. So I figure I just got to pull a trigger and give it a try, and it will be what it will be. But I think that there's enough forgiveness in the process that it should look okay. So I've got my measured out epoxy. I've got my mica powders. I've got ocean blue. I figured that was a good choice. How could I go wrong? I'm going to do 4 total colors. Ocean blue, and I've got golden blue, which is a little bit lighter, followed by blue green, and then tea green as I head up towards the beach. I also have some white dye, so I'm going to try to do a wave with the heat gun and spray it down after I let the original mix of colors set for about 20 minutes. I think that's the way to do it. I could be totally wrong. I've also got a creme brulee butane torch to pop bubbles as I see them. and I've got my Wagner heat gun. So wish me luck. I figure if I totally blow it, I've got a lot of depth of the routing in the body that I could actually put a whole nother cover over it if I need to. But I'm gonna try and shoot for this once and be done with it, see what it comes out.
Okay, so here's where I am so far. I poured in all the epoxy that I had mixed up, and I like it. I'm going to come back with a butane torch and pop some of the bubbles here in a second, and then I'm going to give it a little bit of time to set up because it's pretty thick, and then I'm going to try and do the layer of white with a little frosty wave effect here. So adding the white epoxy to the ocean turned out to be a bit of a disaster. Um, I realized I waited a little too long, and this West Systems epoxy was kicking along here. The whole thing got really hot while I was trying to apply the white, and I think that's what screwed things up. I did manage to take a scalpel and carve out a lot of the white to make almost look like some artificial lacing while it was still soft. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I might sand the white down a little bit and then add a little bit more blue, or I might just leave it the way it is. I'm going to let it go ahead and cure the way it is right now. And then I can always sand it down and throw another layer of something else on top of it. We'll see. So after a little recovery work, I sanded off all of the white pigment, and I got back down to kind of the swirls of the mica powder that I like better. Not going to try that again. I left a little bit of the white along the edge of the sand, which I think looks good, and we're going to leave it go from there.
Okay, so probably the most ridiculous part of this guitar build is I decided to put internal illumination inside the epoxy with it. And in researching a couple opportunities and items, I came up with some options. Number one was going to be EL wire, this electroluminescent wire that has a battery pack with 2 AA batteries. It's pretty cool. I was hoping for like this orange color that would kind of make a sunset at the beach kind of feel, and highlighted around that recess around the guitar. The only problem with this stuff is that this thing is a very high frequency emitter, and even you can hear this high-pitched whine that comes from the battery pack. And when you place this thing around the magnetic pickups of the guitar, it makes a horrendous whine, and I don't think it's even worth trying to shield the pickup from it. It's just way too much to make the guitar render it completely useless. So that kind of got rid of my EL wire concept. My next concept was going to be standard LED kind of strip lighting, which is one of these deals. Now, the cool part about this is that the LEDs are really bright, although they come in, it's not like one continuous light, and they're in these separate lights, but it also has the remote control where you can change the color and, you can make it red, you can make it green, you can make it blue, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can change it. You've seen these before. It's not a big deal. But in my opinion, the LEDs are almost too bright, and to have to deal with this huge battery pack and maybe installed on the strap somewhere was going to be a bit overwhelming. So kind of nixed that idea. Finally, enough research, I came up with these little fairy lights that you can get on Amazon for really cheap. I got a pack of 6 of these things for maybe 10, 15 bucks. But the cool thing about it is the battery pack is really, really small. These 2 little watch batteries inside this tiny little guy. And it's got about 20 little LED fairy lights that are super small, will fit nicely in the recess around. it's one color, it doesn't flash, doesn't do anything fancy, but for this guitar, I think that's perfectly appropriate. And then the really cool thing about this is that I can take this little battery pack and I can actually tuck it into the control cavity underneath the pots for the volume and the tone. And so for the wiring for the guitar, I made some simplification. Since I'm not going to have an external jack, I wired the jack right into where the switch was. I got my simple volume and tone because I'm going to have the one bridge pickup. And then I found I have a toggle switch, a little single throw, single polarity toggle switch, which then I can wire the fairy lights into. So there'll be just a single little switch with the battery pack in the control cavity of the guitar. This totally turned out to be what I think is the best opportunity for this, so I'm going to work that into the plan. So I drilled a little hole between the control cavity retainer here and right on the corner so that I can fish the lights through the hole and route them around the body of the guitar. Thread all those fairy lights to that little connection. One more ridiculous thing to add to this guitar, and that is glow-in-the-dark powder. I'm going to add a little white epoxy with some glow-in-the-dark powder along the edge of the white that I've created with the white pigment, and that will hide the wire to the fairy lights, as well as add a little glow-in-the-dark benefit. I don't even know if that's going to work because the epoxy is supposed to protect against UV light. I don't know how much UV light's going to get through the epoxy to even get to the glow powder. But I've got it. I bought it. It was like $5 online. Why not use it? We'll see what happens.
So before putting on the glow epoxy, I went around the edge and installed the fairy lights under the recess. And here's how it looks with the lights turned down a little bit low. And I think it's going to be perfect for this guitar. Now it's time for the glow epoxy.
So I mixed up a little glow powder into some epoxy, and I'm going to take a paintbrush and just dab it along this white line here.
And I went a little crazy with the glow-in-the-dark epoxy. I put a whole layer across the sand. So now, see if this shows up on my video when I turn off the lights. Oh yeah. Okay, now I got my lights installed. I got my glow-in-the-dark epoxy and my shells glued down the way I want them and the outlay that I want them. I got everything set up. It's time to pour the top pours. So it's been a full 24 hours since the pour, and the epoxy's still curing. It's still just a little bit soft with the fairy lights inside. Now it makes it look kind of like a pool lights do. So I'm going to start my very technical relicking process. I got all my hardware tucked in this box that it came in. I sealed up the edges on the inside. This is all the chrome stuff. And I'm going to seal this up, and I'm going to shake up the box like a James Bond martini for about 20 minutes while watching Monday Night Football. There you go. It was a little spooky. I got it wide enough so I should get the pickup wires and a grounding wire through there without any problem. So to get my bridge position, I put a couple of strings on the E strings and down onto the E string post, the high and low, so I can make sure that the strings were lined up straight down the neck. And then I measured the scale length very carefully so that I could set the bridge scale right in the middle of the range of adjustment for the bridge, so I can set good intonation within that 1/4 inch. I marked the lines of the bridge distance as well as the outline on the tape here. And then I made my marks for the pilot holes that I need to drill for the back of the bridge to install it. So unfortunately, my light switch, toggle switch, broke. So I had to order a new one. But in the meantime, I went ahead and wired up an interrupted path from the battery to the lights with just 2 lead wires I can attach to a switch later. Now when I touch those together, you'll see lights work. So that's at least a full separate circuit. Doesn't have anything to do with the guitar. All I've got left is my pickup wires and my grounding wire from the pickup cavity. And then here is my guitarelectronics.com simple wiring diagram, which is, you know, 2 volume, a tone, and an output jack, nothing else. And how that looks now on the switch. Now I'm reversing the standard Telecaster switch plate. Usually the toggle switch is in the front like that, but I'm putting the volume and tone this way, and just the input jack, I drilled a little bit bigger panel hole to put the input jack in the back, and then this hole here on the end is where my light switch is going to go. Here's a quick video of the completed guitar, kind of getting some of the in close detail of the epoxy and the shells and the sand, and this is with the lights off. I reach down, flip my toggle switch here, and here's how it looks with the lighted LEDs hooked up. Came out rather nice. Pretty happy with it. And in a second I'll show you with the lights turned off. Here is the body in the dark with the lights turned off. Gives it a nice effect. And some effect from that blue mica powder. Sparkly a little bit. And now when I turn the internal LEDs off, I have the glow in the dark effect as well, which I'll get up a little closer. Not sure how well this is going to replicate on the video, but I painted each of the shells individually with the glow in the dark epoxy, so that came out a little bit brighter. Anyway, there you go. Hope you enjoyed this adventure into the fine line between stupid and clever. Check us out next time. I got a few more projects in the works. Take care.